Good evening, viewers, and welcome to the Personal Injury Law Show. We're back for our 9th season on a brand new set.
Looks great.
If you're joining us for the first time, the PI Show takes you into the legal world of personal injury and issues affecting the law today. I'm Tony Carbone, a personal injury lawyer of 27 years' experience. You can follow the PI Show on Facebook for more updates and to leave us your questions and comments. Joining me tonight is John Carancis, an accredited law specialist.
Good evening, Tony. Good evening, viewers.
What's an accredited law specialist, John?
Accredited law, I'm a specialist in personal injury law, Tony, accredited by the Law Institute of Victoria.
Which means that you're like a surgeon.
Well, you can say that. A surgeon in personal injury law, Tony.
That's it. And also Alice O'Kane, an up-and-coming superstar in the legal world.
Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, Alice. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Tony, what's in the news for another season?
John, what's in the news tonight, and viewers, it's about this Costa Concordia. We're talking about the rights and legal liabilities of carriers and injured people that are injured in circumstances similar to this ship going down.
What a disaster, Tony.
It's just unbelievable. It's actually 110 years to the day that the Titanic went down. And the Titanic was probably 3 times smaller and a lot less people. But it's amazing. It wasn't even out at sea, Alice.
It's just incredible, Tony.
He's hit an island.
They say that there were over 4,000 people on board.
It's just bizarre, isn't it?
It's incredible.
He's hit the island of Giglio, Tony.
Oh, well, the gigolo.
The Captain Scatino, the gigolo of Gigolo. I'm not sure. What can you say about him, Tony?
Yeah, they're going to be calling him a lot of names, John.
He's under house arrest.
Yes, I think now he's in custody again.
Charges of manslaughter.
Yeah, it's
murder. I'm not
bizarre,
sure.
Isn't it?
It's very unpleasant.
But look, just some of the articles that I've read is one of the articles says Captain denies abandoning ship because he tripped and fell into the water. I mean, it's just absolutely extraordinary.
That's right. I tripped and fell into the water. What's all that about, Tony?
Seems
well, the ship was
convenient.
tilted, Alice, wasn't it? So,
it was tilted. It's possible he did slip overboard by accident. It's hard to know.
And landed into a lifeboat.
And Tony, you've heard that footage by the Coast Guard telling him...
We're going to go to that later on, John.
Excellent, excellent. So, but Tony, by the way, by him tripping and falling into the water, does he have a claim himself?
Oh, I think he's got a lot more issues. I think he's going to need every cent that he can get.
And then you've got the ex-dancer lover.
Yeah.
What's all that about, Tony?
What's the headline there, John?
Tony, knickers in the captain's cabin. What's all this about, Tony?
Oh, well.
She was on the deck when the ship hit the rocks.
You know what I find astounding, viewers, is
what was she doing there, Tony?
Obviously keeping an eye on...
This is just... So we've got a guy that's in charge of this ship, doing who knows what, having, you know, in charge of a dangerous weapon, Tony.
Yeah.
And he's just crashed into... The gigolo's crashed into the gigolo.
The island of Gigolo.
Oh.
But the thing that astounds me is that there's a lot of talk about him being inexperienced, and this also seems to point out to that, doesn't it?
That's right, that's right. There is a lot of talk about how the captain was told to get back on board the ship. Whether he slipped off or got off, I think we'll never know. But there is a lot of talk about how he was almost on a frolic of his own with this ship.
But what's also astounding, viewers, is the fact that you've got a captain that's not paying attention. I would have thought there's a second officer or a second in charge, and there would have been engineers. I'm just astounded. They've got a lot of electronic equipment and technology these days and charts, and at one stage there was talk of him not having those rocks and things not being charted, which is really bizarre, isn't it?
Tony, my grandfather was a ship captain for Onassis, on Onassis ships. If he saw this, he'd be turning in his grave right now.
Well, John, just on that point there, we might as well get into the show, and I'll just say this, viewers, when you do take a cruise, and especially cruises overseas, read the terms and conditions of your contract very, very carefully, because, John, most of these liability of carriers is governed by what? What is the thing that governs these contracts?
The Athens Convention, which was signed in 1974 in Athens, which basically establishes a scheme of insurance and compensation for people injured and, well, if you die, there's a scheme of compensation which is established, but in my view, Tony, and I think you know my views, this actual scheme totally reduces the compensation.
Well, traditionally they didn't want ship owners to be heavily exposed to liability because being out at sea is an inherently dangerous
more or less hard enough
anyway,
as it
isn't
is.
it?
That's right, Tony. I think it's perhaps also important to note for the viewers, just getting back to what you were saying about the contract. A lot of people will notice when they buy a ticket for a cruise that it's quite a lengthy contract. There are a lot of terms and conditions, and it's important to know simply because those terms do refer to very specific areas of the law which cover liability and also cover things like compensation for personal injury. And a lot of those tickets will refer to the Athens Convention that John has mentioned, and they quite often very strictly limit the liability of the shipping company simply because it is a big deal to get out there on a cruise ship with a lot of passengers.
Well, this last year I went on a cruise, and the shipping company that I went with, the terms and conditions are that small, I could barely read them without a magnifying glass.
Not in a font.
You didn't hit the island of Giglio,
No,
did you, Tony?
I'll tell you what,
Did you meet the Gigolo, Tony?
I actually would have been very, very disappointed because I didn't read the terms and conditions before I went on the ship. But Alice, can you take us through some of those limits of liability of the owners of a ship?
There are some strict limitations, Tony, including the fact that if you want to make a claim, depending upon what it's for, whether it's personal injury, damage to your luggage, loss of luggage, there are very strict timelines. For example, you need to write to the ship company within 15 days if you've lost luggage. You need to write to them within 30 days if you've got damage to property, and you need to lodge a claim for personal injury within 6 months, and that's after you've given written notice.
It's very strict. You've got to give them notice initially, and then you've got to lodge a claim within a certain time frame.
So Alice, if you're an Australian passenger that was on the Costa Concordia, you get back to Melbourne, what do? You have to fax your notice of intent to sue to Genoa somewhere in Italy.
More or less straight away. And I think in this case, John, the shipping company who owns the Costa Concordia is actually based in Florida in the USA, which brings in a whole nother kettle of fish regarding liability.
Yeah, we'll go to that later on.
Because, well, the question is, well, I want to sue in Australia. I want to sue in the US jurisdiction.
We'll turn to that, John.
Yes.
But of significance also is that the convention sets the limits of the amount that you can claim, which is not very high.
No, it's not really very high.
We're going to have to go to a sponsors break, so after the break we'll go to those limits.
Yes.
We'll talk about what law is applicable, and we'll also see some footage of what actually happened on the night of this disaster. So viewers, please stay tuned and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.